Hi guys, James back again. Yes, another one. Figured, well, my spare time I could either play an hour of video games or I could do another video. And I picked the more constructive route with this hobby I've developed over the last year. And finished another list today that was not so much an amalgamation. There's been some lists that I've done that where they revolve around just a handful of movies where I want this movie to appear on a list, but it didn't fit into one of the lists that I'd already started, so I created a list around in this case I guess about two or three movies. And in this case, it's the top 10 gangster films. Now, it could have been crime dramas or crime thrillers, but gangster films seem to work for these ones. The two or three in particular, but the rest of them as well. Excuse me. So, we will start with number 10. Number 10 is a film from 2006. Excuse me. Written and directed by Bobby Moresco, he's a writer, director, and a producer. He was a producer most notably on Crash and $1 Million Baby. He's worked with Paul Haggis a few times. But he's a director in his own right, and he made this film a little while ago called 10th and Wolf. And this one stars James Marsden, Giovanni Ribisi, Brad Renfro, and then thrown in there is also Dennis Hopper, Val Kilmer in a brief cameo, Piper Perabo, Leslie Ann Warren, Tommy Lee, and Brian Dennehy. And it involves James Marsden, who is, you see, Tommy, and he's the son of a mafia hitman, and he's over serving in the military, and he makes a bad decision, gets discharged from the military and thrown into prison, and to get out, he makes a deal to get out of prison that he has to go back and infiltrate the organized crime that his father and other people are involved in. So he has to go there and make contact again with his cousin. I believe it's his cousin. Because he makes the deal with Brian Dennehy, who plays an FBI agent. But he has to get back in touch with Giovanni Ribisi and Brad Renfro, who are relatives of his, who are in the organized crime world. And there's a good dynamic between James Marsden and Giovanni Ribisi, and it's a well-told story. Supposedly based on, I don't know if it's loosely based on or not, or inspired by, but supposedly based on a story from Joseph Pistone, who was the basis for Donnie Brasco, who infiltrated the mafia in that. And so it's a good movie. It's a good movie. It deserves a place on this list. And it was one that I think I had just seen it on the shelf, and it was just like from the producer of Crash, and I liked the cast, and I watched it and I ended up liking the story. So it's a good one. 10th and Wolf. Good for a direct-to-video. Number 9, we have a Chinese film from 2005 called Election. Not the drama comedy with Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon. This one mainly stars Simon Yam and Tony Leung. Tony Leung of Hero and Infernal Affairs fame. And this one basically involves the Chinese triad. Organized crime in China. And it involves an election for their chairman that comes up every few years. And it's basically a bunch of the members basically battling to see who's going to win and become the new chairman. And that's essentially what the movie is. Now, there is a sequel called Election 2, which I have, but I haven't got around to watching yet. But I was interested. I was intrigued by the gang politics that take place in this film. And I thought Simon Yam and Tony Leung did a good job. And the rest of the cast, who I didn't really recognize their names. Gordon Lamb, that name sticks out. But a lot of the other guys I may have seen before, but it was sort of like some of the Korean films. I didn't, their names didn't really stick out. So that is Election. Number 8, we have a Japanese gangster film called Brother from 2000. And this was directed and starring Takeshi Kitano, who has done a number of films in Japan. And this was the one film he did as a co-production that he made in the U.S. And apparently he didn't have a great experience with the way Americans make films, so he decided, like, I'm going to go back and just make films in Japan. So this was the one time he made a film in North America. And it involves, basically, Yamamoto is Takeshi Kitano, and his gang gets kind of taken apart by a rival gang, and he survives, and he chooses to flee to the U.S. And he hooks up with, I think it says his associate? No, he brings an associate with him, and he hooks up with his half-brother who he hasn't seen in a while. And his half-brother has a gang, and he joins them, and one of the guys in the gang is also played by Omar Epps. And their gang solidifies and begins to grow and gain strength, and taking out other gangs, and they eventually come up against the Italian mafia. And that's where I'll stop, just because I had never seen a Takeshi Kitano film prior to this. I think when I was working at Rogers, I checked this one out. And I was impressed by the relationship between Takeshi Kitano's character and Omar Epps. They have a very good working relationship in the movie, and it's sort of where the term brother comes from. Them working so closely together. So it is a good one. It's called Brother. Not to be confused with, that was Brothers, the Tobey Maguire, Jake Gyllenhaal, Natalie Portman military movie. All right, number 7, we have a movie from 2001 called Knockaround Guys. And this was the debut film from writers, I should know this, because they wrote, I apologize, Brian Koppelman and David Levine. And they were the writers for Rounders. And that's what interested me initially in this film, because it was their directorial debut. And I had a chance to see this in the theater, and I think I picked Ghost Ship. Or I went and saw Ghost Ship, and I was going to see this, and I ended up seeing Abandon. So, but the cast is impressive in this, because you have Barry Pepper, Seth Green, John Malkovich, Dennis Hopper, and Vin Diesel. And you also have Tom Noonan, Sean Doyle, Arthur Nascarella, Kevin Gage, Chris Lemke, Dov Tiefenbach. There's a lot, Mike Starr. There's a lot of great actors in this movie. And it's also one of the more, you get the DVD, and it's also one of the more entertaining, informative commentaries I've ever listened to. Like, I've seen the movie maybe once, but I've watched it with the commentary at least 4 or 5, maybe 6 times, because it's so interesting. And it's pretty much, Barry Pepper is the son of a gangster, played by Dennis Hopper, and Dennis Hopper's right-hand man is John Malkovich. And he needs to make money. He can't get a good job, so he wants to join his father's crime family, and his father doesn't have a lot of faith in him. So to prove that he can do the job, he agrees to go send one of his guys, Seth Green, to pick up a package in another town to bring it back. And Seth Green gets kind of sidetracked there, so the rest of the gang goes to find out what's going on, sort of rescue him or find out what the delay is. And it involves like the cop. It's like a big bag of money, and the cops get their hands on it, and they're going to keep it for themselves, and the criminals have to get it back from them. But Barry Pepper does a great leading job in this one, and Vin Diesel. I think they mentioned that they were making this movie. They made this movie, and he was also in prep on the first Fast and the Furious movie, The Fast and the Furious. So Vin Diesel hadn't exploded yet. He may have, I don't know if he had done Pitch Black yet, but he really exploded with Fast and the Furious. So it was sort of like those movies, the Red Dawn remake and Cabin in the Woods, where they got Chris Hemsworth before he did Thor, but they came out after. So he exploded when those movies came out. Or prior to those movies coming out. Anyway, so that is Knockaround Guys. Number 6, we have another Japanese film from 2019 called First Love. And this was another one done by Takashi Miike. Another relatively tame film in contrast to a lot of his other films. Like Ichi the Killer, Audition, and all that stuff. And this one involves a boxer who goes to the doctor. He's favored to win this match, and he gets knocked out. And he goes to the doctor, and the doctor tells him he has a brain tumor. So that kind of upends his life, and he ends up meeting this girl who has her own psychological problems. She hallucinates every once in a while. She hallucinates seeing her dead father, and she is forced to work as a prostitute. So they sort of get together, but then there's this whole these criminal events, drug smuggling and stuff that are going on, and they get caught up in that. I won't say exactly how, because it's good to experience the rest of how it plays out in the movie. But it's a very sweet relationship between the two of them. And the rest of the cast does a great job. Even all the like criminals and stuff. And I really didn't recognize any of the actors in this one, but I got it again because it was a Takashi Miike film, and the synopsis sounded intriguing, and it's a good film. It's called First Love. Now, the next one, number 5, is one of the films that I put this list around. And it's one that gets a lot of hate. It has, I don't know if it has a 0% on Rotten Tomatoes or a really low score. Totally undeserved. Another one I don't get the hate for it at all. It is from 2018. It is the film called Gotti. It's the John Travolta playing John Gotti, directed by Kevin Connolly from Entourage. And you've also got Kelly Preston playing his wife in the movie, Gotti's wife. And it's essentially the biopic about John Gotti and his rise to being the Don of the crime family in New York. And I thought it was fantastic, because you've got him in prison, spending life in prison, and he's dying of like I think it's throat cancer or something, and it flashes back to the 70s and him just involved in the organization and rising up to capo and rising up to be the boss. And I thought it was told extremely well. I loved this entire movie. I really don't know what people hate about it. Whether or not they just don't like John Travolta or don't like his acting in it. I don't know. I thought it was fine. And yeah, and you can look up John Gotti's life online, read about it anywhere, and it's basically just his rise to power and then his downfall. Where like Sammy the Bull Gravano rats him out and he goes to jail. But I thought everyone did a great job, especially the guy who played John Gotti Jr., his son, Spencer LaFranco. Pruitt Taylor Vince is also in there. Leo Rossi, Stacy Keach, Chris Mulkey. Yeah, it's a great movie. I highly recommend Gotti. Some others may not, but I do. It's my list. Number 4, we have a film from 1990. It is called State of Grace. And it's a film by Phil Joannou. And it's about the Irish mob. And Irish mob in I believe it's in New York. Yeah, New York. And it stars Sean Penn, Ed Harris, Gary Oldman, Robin Wright, John Turturro, John C. Reilly. And this movie is fantastic. And you've basically got Sean Penn as Terry Noonan coming back after being away for a long time and reuniting with his best friend, childhood friend, played by Gary Oldman, who plays Jackie Flannery. And Jackie's brother is played by Ed Harris, and that's Frankie Flannery. And he basically is the head of that crime family. And Sean Penn comes back, and he's been away for a long time, and he ends up working as an undercover cop. He is a cop, but he goes undercover in the Irish mob to try and take down Ed Harris. But he has to do that while knowing that he's working with his best friend, who's the crime boss's brother. And then he reunites with the sister, an old flame of his, Kathleen Flannery, played by Robin Wright. So this all goes down. He's sort of betraying his girlfriend, her brother, who's also his best friend, and it can turn into a giant mess. And it kind of does, but it is a great, great movie. And it was one that I had been aware of for decades. And I knew about this, and Gary Oldman's always done a solid job, and it has a fantastic cast. I'm I'm just going to finally watch it. And I did love it. State of Grace. Great soundtrack, too. Number 3, we have a film from last year, 2020, done by David Ayer. It's one of his latest movies, and it was my number one favorite movie of 2020. It is The Tax Collector, starring Shia LaBeouf, George Lopez, Bobby Soto, and it's essentially, if you heard me talk about it on Movie Madhouse podcast, I basically went through the whole thing. It's sort of like all these criminals all over town dealing drugs and stuff. They have to pay tax to the people in charge, which is Bobby Soto's family, and by extension, the man who's ultimately in charge, known as the Wizard, and he's in prison. And Bobby Soto's right-hand man is a man called Creeper, played by Shia LaBeouf. And I'm just, hands down, the best movie I saw last year and the best performance I saw last year, which was by Shia LaBeouf as Creeper. And true to his name, he kind of creeped me out in this movie. I wasn't sure Shia LaBeouf could do that. He hadn't done that up to this point, but he's kind of scary in the movie. He's very intense, and the movie is super violent. But I had said to my friend Dalton that there had only been 2 movies previously that had my heart pumping from beginning to end. That was John Wick Chapter 2, Mile 22, and then this one, Tax Collector. It is so intense, and it is amazing. And I don't think it got any recognition, and it really deserves to. So does Shia. And regardless of what you think of him or what he's going through right now, he did an amazing job in this movie, and he deserves the recognition for this. And so does David Ayer. Bobby Soto, who's essentially the star of the movie. Oh, man, it's so good. The Tax Collector. Well done, David Ayer. Number 2, one of the other ones that I built this list around, was a film from 2005. It's a Guy Ritchie film that I don't think anyone talks about other than me and my younger brother, and it is a film called Revolver. And it is a mind screw of the highest degree. And you've basically got Jason Statham, Ray Liotta, Vincent Pastore, Andre Benjamin, let me see, Mark Strong, Andrew Howard, and you've got, let me see, it's Jason Statham plays a man named Jake Green who gets out of prison and wants to get revenge on the man who put him in prison, which was Dorothy Matcha, played by Ray Liotta. And he decides he's going to head to one of his casinos and take him for all the money he has. And he ends up hooking up with Andre Benjamin and Vincent Pastore, working as loan sharks to try and build up enough capital to take down Ray Liotta's organization. But there's also this specter of this ultimate crime boss looming over everyone, known as Mr. Gold. And whether you see the theatrical version on DVD or if you can get your hands on the original uncut version, the original uncut version is just... The theatrical version is still a great movie. There's just that little extra, it goes that little extra mile, the uncut version. But the movie is big on philosophy. And it's great. It has chapter stops, sort of like place cards, where like the screen will go black and then this quote, the philosophical quote, will come across the screen. But there's also a lot of the dialogue has a lot of the philosophy just ground right into it. By far my favorite Guy Ritchie film, and it's probably the one that is the least known about, I suppose. And yeah, can't recommend Revolver enough. Just don't have it as the last thing you watch at the end of the night. Don't be tired when you watch this. You'll just be thoroughly confused. You're going to be thoroughly confused anyway, but if you're awake for it, you can at least go to bed thinking about it for the next year or two. Yeah, but in a good way. So that is Revolver. Okay, the number one and the last one, and one of the main reasons I made this list, it is, and I swear I held off on this movie. I kept holding off on this movie because I could have sworn that I had it on another list, whether it was the top 25 of the decade. I know it was almost on there. I think it got cut at the last minute. But it for damn sure would have been number one on my best foreign language films, because it's a Korean film. And you know how much I love those. But I don't know, and I just looked at them like, I can't find this on any list. Why haven't I put it on there? And I've talked about it to a few people, and maybe that's where I thought I had used it before. Excuse me. But I didn't, so... And it is a gangster film, so I put it on at the top of this one. It's from 2013, and it's a film called New World. Not to be confused with the Terrence Malick, Colin Farrell, Christian Bale film, The New World. This is New World. And what I will say first off is I'm going to spoil this film. And I'm also going to spoil Infernal Affairs, and by extension The Departed. So here's a big spoiler alert. And the reason I say is because Infernal Affairs was the basis for The Departed. So they have very similar plot lines. They're just one's transplanted to the US, so they have to change the gangs and all that stuff. But essentially in Infernal Affairs, you have a cop who infiltrates the Chinese mafia, and you have one of the criminals in the mafia infiltrates the police organization, and same happens in The Departed. Cop infiltrates the Irish mob, and one of the Irish mobsters infiltrates the cops, and nobody knows that either one is involved. And where the difference, they're very similar in that aspect, because New World it's a Korean film, but it involves a cop who infiltrate as a young rookie cop, not so much a rookie cop, but a young cop, infiltrated the Korean organized crime, and has risen through the ranks to try and take them down. And he has his contact with the police, but it's a very adversarial relationship. And whereas in Infernal Affairs, at the very end of the movie, he's close to taking him down. His contact gets murdered by the police officer who was actually a mobster, and then also murders the undercover cop. Now, it ended right there with The Departed. Infernal Affairs goes on for a couple more movies, whereas the criminal has to stay ingratiated with the police. Anyway, that's another story. In New World, and I don't feel too bad. I just put the spoiler alert anyway, but I don't feel too bad about spoiling, because this one, you enjoy the entire movie. As I always say, if one little detail, if the twist ending spoils the movie, they made a good twist, not a good movie. This is an awesome movie, and it does have a twist, but it doesn't ruin the movie. You're going to love the whole journey. The twist is towards the end of the movie, like, he has a very adversarial relationship, as I said, with his captain in the police organization, and he jerks him around, doesn't treat him well, keeps threatening to out him if he doesn't do what he wants. He's like, I've been in here for like 10 years. I need to get out. I need to have a normal life. This is killing me. Because he has a wife who's pregnant, a baby on the way. But he's also got one of his best friends is a guy who rose through the ranks with, who's a little bit higher than him, and is one of the guys who's possibly in line to take over. Because at the beginning of the movie, the boss, gets killed in a car accident. Anyway, so towards the end of the movie, the main guy, played by Lee Jung-jae, I think, plays Lee Ja-sung, and he basically, his best friend gets injured, mortally wounded. And at one point in the movie, he had decided to look into the cop that had been harassing them, aka the captain, who is wrangling the main star of the movie, who's in the criminal organization. And he digs up as much dirt as he can on him. But what he also discovers is that his best friend is actually a cop. But he keeps it to himself. And when he's mortally wounded on his deathbed, he basically says, I left a present for you in my office. And he basically confesses, like, I know who you really are. And I'm not going to out you, but you need to pick a side. You need to make a decision. So he's giving him a choice. You can go back to being a cop and possibly get killed, or you can be where you're supposed to be, which is here with us. And he essentially, his best friend, there's only two people who knows who he really is, because his cop boss destroyed his file. And that's his cop boss and his best friend. His best friend dies. He basically arranges to have his cop handler killed, and he ascends to be the boss. So whereas in Infernal Affairs and Departed, the cop ends up getting killed at the end of the movie, this guy basically becomes the identity that he's been playing, the facade he's been portraying this whole time. He's just like, I'm no longer a cop. This is where I'm supposed to be, and I'm going to assume control. And it's the movie just floors me every time I watch it. It is so good. And where it was just like, you're watching most of the movie, it's like, this is just like Infernal Affairs. It's great, but it's just like Infernal Affairs. And at the end, you're just like, oh my God, they just took it to another level. So I put this movie above Infernal Affairs and way above The Departed. Just my opinion. Maybe you'll share it after you watch it. I don't know. It's so good. Yeah, so that was the end of this list. I hope you like this one as well. I'm going to keep them coming for as many ideas as I have. Maybe not every single day, but I still have a bit of a backlog I'm trying to work through. And so, like and subscribe if you want. And okay, I guess that's it. Toodles.